So in this video, we'll look at our different market mechanism. So for instance, why North Korea's economy looks totally different from the US economy, and can we characterize them? And so before we look at the different market mechanism, and we have to revisit our old friend, three core issues or three basic dimensions. Especially we try to connect the three basic issues, three core issues with our production possibility curve. So do you remember our three core issues? What, how, and for whom? So in terms of what to produce, and so what to produce, so there are millions of the points along a production possibility curve, and each one represents a specific mix of the output. So we can choose only one of these points at any time. So keep in mind, any point on the production possibility curve is efficient. But in terms of at which point we should produce, it totally depends on the economy itself and the government policy the directions. So the second question, how to produce? So this sometimes someone must decide which production method and the technology to use. Should we import? Should we just domestically produce it? So I don't know how much you pay attention on the government policy. So recently, the government imposed a high tariff on all kinds of products that we import from another country. So the reason a country decides to import product from another country is because usually another country has a better factor to produce that specific product. So they are cheaper, even including the transportation cost, the shipping cost, and they are still cheaper than producing the product in the domestic market. So that's why the decision maker will decide to how to produce. So they will as treat it as import. So the third question is for whom to produce. So after we've decided what to produce and how, so we must address a third basic question, that is for whom. So who is going to get output produced? Should everyone get an equal share? So obviously at this point we'll say yes, everyone should get equal share. And in the later chapters, we will look at more detail about how should we separate our final, can we distribute our final outcomes, final outputs. So answering to this question of what, how, and for whom, so actually largely define an economy, but who formulate answers? So generally speaking, is the answer will formalized by the mechanism itself. So it depends on each country, and they will choose different market mechanisms. So generally speaking, we have three different kind of market mechanism. So the market mechanism, government directive, or a mixture of both. Can you guess for US which kind of mechanism we are using? Market, government directive, a mixture of both. So we will answer this question at the end of this video. So first, let's talk about the market mechanism and how can we characterize it. So when we talk about the market mechanism, we have to mention a very famous economist. His name is called Adam Smith. So in the Wealth of Nations, he mentioned invisible hand. So what does invisible hand means? That means some invisible hand. That means just means hand. So the answer is not. So he said the invisible hand determine what get produced, how and for whom to produce. So can you guess what's the meaning for invisible hand? So for instance, if on the market, if like for instance Tesla is, what do you describe Tesla? Yes, they're expensive. So why? Because we have more people want it, but a Tesla doesn't have mass production, and so that's why they are kind of expensive. So do you think the price itself is decided by the government? Obviously it's not. It's decided by the market. Supply and the demand decide the market. So the invisible hand And so how about, let's say the Tesla, they are decrease their price. So instantly what you will see is we will have more demand, and the supply is satisfied, and the price will rise again. So which means without any intervention, the market is working pretty well, and the invisible hand actually is indicating the price. So the price is playing a role as invisible hand to adjust the supply and the demand to balance the business and the consumers. So this invisible hand actually indicating it is the price, and the price is decided by the market. So so the market mechanism means the use of the market price and the sale to signal desired output or resource allocation. So when the economy using this mechanism, there is no government intervention. Every adjustment, market activity adjustment is depends on the price, because the price is the signal to guiding the producer to produce more or produce less, or guiding the people to buy more or buy less. So the essential feature of the market mechanism is the price signal. So the market mechanism can also answer the how and the for whom questions. So to answer these two questions, usually they define for the market mechanism, the business try to maximize their profit. So the producer will seek to use the lowest cost method of producing a goods, and the market distribute to the highest bidder. Individuals who are willing and able to pay the most for a good tend to get it in the pure market economy. And so here I have to mention a word called a laissez-faire. So laissez-faire means let it alone. And so that means there is no government intervention, and we let a market run by itself. So that's how we characterize the market mechanism. So totally run by the market itself, and the price will play a very important role to adjusting the market. And so think about what's the problem for the market mechanism. So do you remember what I said? The producer try to maximize profit and by using the lowest cost method of the producing goods. Do you remember? I also mentioned the market distribute goods to the highest bidder. So obviously, these are two characteristics indicating the problem for the market mechanism. So the lowest cost method of the producing a good. So does that mean they can abuse the labor, overusing the labor, and so that they can lower the cost but produce more product? Does that mean they can use the poor quality resource and then to manufacturing some food to feeding human beings? And so in terms of distributing goods to the highest bidder, so does that mean the poor people doesn't deserve to live a good life? So obviously, the pure market mechanism have the problem. So now, so to summarize the market mechanism, how they answer the three questions: what, how, and for whom. So for the market mechanism, they answer the what to produce. They are mentioned the produce goods and the service that the customer wants. So customer want doesn't mean that's good. So for instance, we talk about drugs. The customer wants it, but that doesn't mean it is a good thing to produce. And how to produce? So if it is profitable, produce goods and service while keeping production costs low, as we just mentioned. So how about you don't treat labor well? You abuse the labor, just try to save the cost, try to achieve the profitability. So is that a right way to answer how to produce? And then for whom to produce? They will produce for those who are both willing and able to pay for it. So the problem here is, does that mean the poor people doesn't deserve to have any goods? So it doesn't deserve to have any goods. So you can see the good thing is they are free market, so they will let the market decide charge it high, charge it low. But also we see imperfection of this mechanism. That is, sometimes they will be over money driven, and also they will be over will keep the inequality gap very high, income gap very high. So this is the market mechanism. How about the government directive? So this is the totally opposite mechanism. So the government directive, market directive. So the laissez-faire policy Adam Smith favored has always had a share of the critics. So one of the big guys to critique Adam Smith is Karl Marx. So Karl Marx emphasized how free market tend to concentrate wealth and power in the hand of the few at expense of the many. As Karl Marx saw it, unfettered market permit the capitalists, those who own the machinery and the factory, to enrich themselves while the proletariats, the worker, toil long hours for subsistence wages. So Karl Marx argued that the government not only had an intervene, but had to own all the means of the production. So this is one branch of the people supporting the government directive market mechanism. So you can see the problem in this situation is they are trying to fix the problem we see in the market mechanism. That is, they don't care about poor people and that they don't care about the workers' working environment. However, they go totally opposite. So they want the government not only set up the rule, but also they own everything. So talking about a government directive mechanism market, can you find example in the world? Yes, you're right, North Korea. So North Korea is one of the country adopting the government directive mechanism. So you can see the government is very powerful, and unfortunately, people living in the country is not that happy. The people in the country is not happy. So this is Karl Marx is one of the very extreme economists promoting the government directive. So another guy we have to mention is John Keynes. So John Keynes seemed to offer a less drastic solution. So in another way, he do promote government intervention, but he is not as extreme as Karl Marx. So what he mentioned is the market he conceded was pretty efficient in organizing production and building better mousetraps. So which means he do agree that the market itself running pretty well. But sometimes, however, individual producer and worker had no control over the broader economy. He believed the cumulative action of so many economic agents could easily tip the economy in the wrong direction. So, for instance, 1998 and the financial 2007-2008 financial crisis is one big example to illustrate if we let the market run by itself and a bunch of rich guys they work together without following the rule and without following the ethical conduct, and it will causing a huge national, even global problems. So that's why in King's view, government should play an active role, but not all inclusive role in managing the economy. So in another way, the difference between Karl Marx and the John Keynes is Karl Marx means the government not only need to regulate, but also they own all the assets from the country. So they are the only one can make a decision for the economy. But in John Keynes' this opinion, so government is important, but their role shouldn't be fully control the economy. They still should let the market run by themselves, but government will play a role to regulate, set up rules. So this is our two economists represent the government directive economy, but they are different. Karl Marx is very extreme. John Keynes is in the middle between a market mechanism and government directive. So that's why John Keynes' policy are very welcomed by the U.S. government. And so the core of the most debate is some variation of the what, how, and for whom questions. So the conservative favor Adam Smith's laissez-faire approach with the minimum government interference. So that's we still have economists very support Adam Smith's idea. So liberals tend to think government intervention is needed to improve market outcomes. So if you have interest, you can read the two case study on the textbook, the world views. So one is about the market resilience versus government resilience, and the one is about the index economic freedom. So they are talking about the current debating between the Adam Smith's laissez-faire approach with the John Keynes government directive approach. So the next, we have to talk about the third market mechanism. So it is nothing new. Actually, it is a combination of the both extreme approach. It's called a mixed economy. So actually, most economies use the combination of the market signals and the government directive to select economic outcomes. So when we talk about this idea, it's more like John Keynes' proposal. So we let the market run by itself, and the invisible hand still working, but the government will also play a role in this market mechanism, that is, try to regulate, help the market to run healthily by themselves. So for the mixed economy, it's an economy that uses both market signals and the government directive to allocate goods and resource. So after we talking about the three mechanism, so do you know which mechanism US adopt? Yes, you're right. Mixed economy. So the same as China, UK, we all adopt the mixed economy. So the market signals and the government directive to allocate goods and the resource. And so the question is, why people think the mix of the both will be the best? So the answer is pretty straightforward. So the market-oriented economy ranked pretty high, government-run economy ranking low, but the combination will be the best because the government will be able to allow to avoid some hot economy to cool it down, such as if the government has very tight, relatively tight regulation in 2007, 2008, so we shouldn't have that global financial crisis. And so the next, we will look at market failure and the government failure. So when the market signal do not give the best possible answer to what, how, and for whom question, and we see that the market mechanism has failed. So the market failure is an imperfection in the market mechanism that previous optimal outcomes. So I want to give you a couple examples. So the Milan, which is the company which produced EpiPen, increased the price of the EpiPen from $100 in 2007 to $608 in 2016. Wow, that's a dramatic increase, right? So this happened because it's a market failure. So on the market, Milan is the only company, major company produced the EpiPen, and the reason they become the only company because the patent. So monopolists tend to charge the highest price. So if there is only one giant seller, a supplier on the market, so that supplier will consider as a monopoly. So the monopoly tend to charge a higher price because nobody compete with them, and the consumer needs them, so they can charge as high as they want, and produce less than competitive market. So this is one example. Another example, leaded gasoline was banned decades ago because of its harmful effect on the brain. So the harmful health effect from the leaded gasoline is a negative externality. So without government intervention, and people will keep using the leaded gasoline, supply will keep supplying the leaded gasoline, and after even they know it will have a harmful effect. So the government intervention is very important in that situation because it will help the business to consider this kind of negative impact generated on the users. So this is the market failure, two examples of market failure. So the market is not perfect. So we also have the government failure. So government intervention may move us closer to our economic goals, but government intervention may fail as well. So how we define a government failure? So the government failure intervention, government intervention that fails to improve economic outcomes, and we will consider government failure. So I want to give you a couple examples. So for instance, the government might force an industry to clean up its pollution in a manner that is excessive. So over clean the water may not necessary, and so that is considered a government failure. It creates a waste. And also the government mandated pollution control technologies that are too expensive or even obstacle. So make sure you understand that when you are trying to protect environment, you also have to keep the business running. You cannot make the company make bankruptcy and in order to protect environment. So that would be considered as a government failure. And also think about the government impose excessive tax and transfer payments so that the total economic pie shrink, making society as a whole worse off. So if you charge the high income group too high tax, so that will frustrate them to working hard, and then and at the same time, if you give too much transfer payment to the very poor people, you make them you reduce their motivation to working hard because they know they will get money from the government eventually. So this also considered as the government failure. So the newly introduced incentive, including increase the private ownership, moved China away from a central planning economy in an effort to increase productivity and growth. So that is an example about the government failure. So for every country, they always try to seeking balance. So none of the above failure, either market failure or government failure, has to occur, but that they might. And the challenge for any society is to minimize failures by selecting the appropriate balance of the market signals and the government directive. So for this, seeking the balance requires that we know how market works and why they sometimes fail. We also need to know what policy option the government has and how and when they might work. So here we talk about the different market mechanism, good and bad, and when the government will fail their role, and when the market gonna fail their role in running the economy. So hope they will help you to understand what happened around you about government policy when we consider as a fail, and also you try to think about why the competitive market will create unfair and will increase the income gap. So all those are related to the market failure and the government failure. So a good government will help the market back to on the right track. A very healthy market mechanism will also help the government making a better decision and set up the better regulation. So in next video, we will look at what economics is all about, and we will discussing some very similar concepts, and we'll try to distinguish them.